Hello, this is Bob Burchett. I'm your presenter today. I'm cousin to the famous Bill Burchett, one-time owner of the Shirley Buick. This is the car Shirley was chauffeured in for years. It's now owned by your friends here locally in the room today, Dave and Diane Reedy. The story is a different view of Shirley seen through the eyes of the car she was chauffeured in from 1940 onwards, along with some surprising background info. Now, in a most unusual twist, I'm going to narrate this entire event because it's being recorded, and at future times others will be able to pick up the recording and view it in case they missed this today. So I'm going to narrate it, which is not commonly done for a PowerPoint. So, moving right along, today I'm going to try hard to keep you awake, since most of you already know about 95% of everything the world has ever known about Shirley. But I'm the different guy. I'm going to try and keep you awake during this event, since I have a couple of items you might not have seen before to make you smile, and I'm going to make you gasp every now and again by starting with things like this. Yes, a little bad news to start with. This is the wanted poster that was put out when the Charles Lindbergh Jr., the baby of the Lindbergh family, was kidnapped. That was only 4 years prior to Shirley getting into this. The memory was very fresh. No one wanted to talk about it, but everybody knew about it. And the parents were scared, all the celebrities were scared, and all of the children of the celebrities were equally concerned with this. This made for many changes in Shirley's life and the Temple family in general, along with the studios. So let's get right to it. After the Lindbergh kidnapping, Shirley was chauffeured everywhere. The Temples were very concerned. Here's a picture of her with John, known as Griffith, her first bodyguard, beside the Fox Studios Cadillac. This big heavy-duty car carried her everywhere. Griff was always very close to Shirley. Griff carried a revolver under his coat at all times. He was prepared to use it. He'd been a roustabout earlier in life, and he put up with no nonsense. Anyone that got anywhere near Shirley that didn't look like they were on the up and up, you probably wouldn't want to have been that person. Zanuck said, "If we lose Shirley, Fox is out of business." So let's take a look. However, opposing that is Zanuck, Fox, and the Temples. They worked constantly to put Shirley's cute face out front everywhere. Here's a cute little image of a January 1935 calendar with Shirley peeking her head through it. These were nice. It kept Shirley's face out in front of her admiring public. And by and large, most results were good ones, but sometimes it caused problems. Here's one of several of these clippings that we have today available for you, and it's showing the level of threats the Temple family endured. The constant barrage of them kept the FBI on alert to take good care of Shirley. She never forgot their careful attention. I'll read you a little bit of the excerpts here. This idiot named Frank Edward Steffens, he admitted to posting a letter to Mrs. Shirley Temple demanding that she get the money if you want to keep Shirley. This was an extortion letter for $25,000. It never made it to Shirley, but it did get right to the FBI, who immediately picked him up, and that was the end of that. This was not the only time this would happen. They were always under the concern of this type of thing. Here's another one, and one's a little hard to read. The original clipping is smaller than this, so when you expand it out, it gets a little sticky. Now, this farm boy is accused of a threat letter. Doesn't sound like a very talented individual, does it? So another $25,000. So this time it's sent, and it reads out here, unless $25,000 is dropped from an airplane, at least he's inventive, near Grant, Nebraska on May 15th, the life of Shirley Temple will be endangered. Well, that didn't last long. So he was pretty well quickly picked up. The FBI was right on the case. And they were constantly vigil for Shirley. And moving right along. Now, gotta laugh sometimes. Here's an FBI report you can laugh about. So Shirley's in her dressing room. Let's set the stage. And Hoover has staked out 5 bodyguards at the door of her small bungalow. And this is an enjoyable conversation. This shows that Shirley could hold her own with any important dignitary or major political figure. And the cute clipping of that shows this capability would later prove valuable to Richard Nixon and to Ronald Reagan. And it says, Hoover came in, he carried no machine gun. He wasn't even frowning an FBI frown. So today he's interviewing a very small chief in her own right, Shirley Temple. The meeting took place in her star's dressing room at the Fox Studios. In a 10-minute chat, Miss Temple told J. Edgar Hoover that he must bring her a Tommy gun, and that he would also wear the gold badge of the Shirley Temple Police, and that he also must sign her autograph book. Hoover, in return, told Miss Temple that he would send her a machine gun from Washington, that he liked dogs, and she is the sweetheart of the G-men. He also wrote that in her autograph book. So let's see what next is happening. This is how the public saw this event. It's got a tiny little square down here in the bottom corner, and that's what the public saw when it was printed in the newspaper. So it's printed September 10th, 1937. But meanwhile, Shirley has the original, and she signed a copy of it and presented it to J. Edgar Hoover herself. And it looks like this. Here's a nice picture, up close and personal, signed to J. Edgar Hoover, Love, Shirley Temple. And this is how they spent a lot of their life, close, and he was always on alert. Shirley was also well known to the entire FBI, and here's a group photo. This is the entire field office, and here's J. Edgar Hoover with, of course, Shirley right in the center. Signed again, says, Love, Shirley Temple. This would not be the last time they would come to meet with her. Now we're going to pause for you to take a drink, because you'll need it as we move along. Now we're going to hop a little back to the car story. I'm here about the car. My cousin owned this wonderful Buick. I got to drive it and ride around in it. It's a great car. You'll be seeing it before too terribly long. But the Temples had been planning to escape from Zanuck and Fox. They wanted out. So to get this plan in action, they would no longer have access to the Fox Studios chauffeured car or Griff. So when they got the Buick, it was sent out, it was customized, brought back, and at that point the Temples were now ready to be able to split up with Fox and Zanuck. So the Buick had been purchased and readied. The Temples were out shopping for more pay for Shirley, and they weren't gone very long. Here we are in May 12, 1940. The newspaper reports, Shirley out of pictures. So the parents have obtained a release at her age 11. Most of you all know that already. So Shirley may not be seen again on the screen, so it says. We know that didn't last. So far, Shirley has been a happy, normal child who's been given every opportunity and advantage in her work and studio environment. So she's led a special life, and we all know it. So now the Buick comes in, and the Cadillac is out. Here's the Buick, the star of our show, me in particular, along with Dave and Diane. This is a custom 1940 Series 80 Buick, ordered and built in late 1939 for you car folks out there. It's a gorgeous car. They were always concerned for her safety. This is a very well-built car, able to slow down a bullet, perhaps intended for Shirley or maybe the chauffeur to stop the show. Luckily, that never happened. Now, to carry the story forward, Rita Dubus, thank you, Rita. As far as I know, she says, Griff and Mabel moved out of the Brentwood house when Shirley retired from Fox. Most all of you know that they were living in the bungalow on the Temples' property. So, I don't know, she says, if the Temples stayed in contact with them. The financial responsibility for Griff had been transferred from Zanuck to the Temples sometime after the CC trip, that means cross-country, IIRC, and that means if I remember correctly. Shirley mentioned a bodyguard named Palmtree in Child Star, CS, when she was at Westlake, but IDK, I don't know if he lived with the Temples or was hired when needed. There's another mystery. So this is the cover of the Life magazine, which you'll find here today at the show. And here's a nice picture of it, July 11th, 1938, on the cross-country trip. Now, enter Lewis Palmer as Shirley's new bodyguard chauffeur. Now, they're shopping her out to the studios, and I was told that Palmer was suggested to be the chauffeur bodyguard by David O. Selznick. I was hunting for research to do this presentation. That was some time ago. And I happened upon this nice clipping. This clipping says Shirley Temple's former bodyguard lives in the city. Now, he lives in the city where later on the family got connected. Palmer's son and his wife found this clipping. They also found it the same time I did. And they left their names in on the search engine. If anybody has any further information, to please contact them. And that is Frank Palmer, the son of Dean Palmer, and his wonderful wife, Evelyn. I found their names there. I called them up, and we spent a couple hours on the phone together. They were a lot of fun to chat with. We crossed paths searching for the same information. They told me a lot of the family history and sent me 2 photos. So here's the first one. It's presented here that Shirley sent to Dean. This is the first one autographed to Dean Palmer. Best wishes, Shirley Temple. She's turning into quite the lady, huh? Now, we're going to connect some dots for you. Lewis Dean Palmer is Palmtree. How do I know that? Well, there's some Old English, French, Latin, a nickname for someone who's been on a pilgrimage, Palmtree, Palmer. There's part of the connection. That explains the use of the Palmtree nickname. Now for the proof, and I'll need a drum roll for that when I show you this one. Here is a autographed picture to Palmtree from Shirley. So there's your connection. Frank and Evelyn had a lot of their private information to share, and they told me Lewis was 6'2", being that tall, and the history of the family name being of the palm tree. She always called him that, and they have this signed picture. Dean protected her till at least 1945 when she marries Agar, and the Buick fades into the background. It might have been the car that they were chauffeured off to the wedding, or maybe from there perhaps to a honeymoon, but the car isn't really mentioned to speak of from there. And the Palmers have been searching most of their life for any possible photographs, with Shirley being chauffeured by Dean. But they explained that very carefully to me, that Dean made every effort to hide Shirley from public view. Sure, Zanuck, Fox, Temples, everybody wanted Shirley in the public eye. Dean didn't want that. When he was carrying her around, he wanted it to be as innocuous as possible. So he made it a point that there were no photographs, which is unfortunate for us, who would all dearly love them. But he wasn't looking after us, he was looking after Shirley. So here's the next slide is that Shirley and Vice President then, Richard Nixon, had been working together before her appointment. We all know she was appointed to a government position. So here's a clipping that says Shirley Temple, personal friend of the Vice President, left her NBC studio to pay him a visit. Nixon was in a makeup room at the time when 2 FBI officers were posted outside. She walks up and says, "I would like to see the Vice President." The FBI guard says, "You have to be a member of the FBI to get in there now." She says, "My brother is an FBI agent. Let me in." He says, "You're not. You stay out." Meanwhile, with all this ruckus going on outside the door, Nixon comes outside to see what's happening and says, "Oh, hello, Shirley. Come on in." At the invitation of Richard Nixon, Shirley goes inside and they had a nice chat. So Nixon loved the fact that Shirley worked very hard toward his campaign. She did a lot of phone calls and appearances and things like that. He never forgot it. When it was his turn to reciprocate, she had helped make him president. He was ready to give something back to her. What he did was he initiated an appointment to her being a delegate to the United Nations. That was suggested by Dr. Henry Kissinger. Now, what follows is not for the faint of heart. Now you're going to see the stuff you probably haven't seen before. This part's not for the faint of heart at all, because the FBI is now tasked with taking apart Shirley Temple Black from her birth to the day of Nixon proposing to appoint her. And the next slide is the result of that work. Now you're getting to see the behind the scenes. In 1969, Nixon proposes her for an appointment to the United Nations. That's the beginning. When you do that, that starts a process where the FBI is called in and they have to investigate everything, literally from birth to that date. The investigation started in August 18th of 1969. The start date was August the 12th, and it ran through the 18th of 1969. Now think about this. There's only 6 days to get this job done. Very short period of time. Now, this document in the upper left-hand corner, why do I have this? And that is because it was declassified. It may be declassified, but it's not easy to find. So I used a connection and got into it, and I found it. It was automatically declassified date of February 25th of 2015. Still hidden, but declassified. The reporting office was Los Angeles in the Bureau, and the character of the case was a special inquiry. Notice the report was made by, and there's a blank square. This is a redaction. The report was made by someone that the FBI did not want to leave public. So that's the first redaction. The title of the case is Every Name That Shirley Has Ever Been In. Shirley Temple Black, aka Shirley Temple. Shirley Jane Temple Black. Mrs. Charles A. Black, Mrs. Charles Alden Black, and Mrs. John Agar up to that time. So, these references are all by teletype. Now, when we say teletype, this is the original wire transmission. Teletypes were connected together through a network, and they were literally wire to wire to wire through the network. So the FBI has its own private network of teletype, feeding through their own connections. So this was done with Bureau teletype to Washington, Los Angeles teletype to the Bureau, San Francisco teletype to the Bureau, Sacramento teletype to the Bureau, and the Los Angeles teletypes to the Bureau, and New York. These are all dated 8/15. The wire is getting hot from all the traffic about Shirley Temple and what the FBI is hunting down. So this is page 1. I'm cherry picking out a few slides and clippings and pieces to show you, because there's way more than you're going to see here today. Moving right along. So it begins. Shirley is unaware that the FBI is sifting through her entire life. So think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Let's say you want to be a political appointee. You've got a buddy up high there, and you're going to get appointed to a big fat plum job. Well, think again. This is what's going to happen. Now, Nixon, he's a nice guy. He's only repaying a debt of gratitude to Shirley for her tireless campaign work. Well, okay, but when you read the dossier built up on the Temple family and everyone that ever interacted with Shirley, they're all being ruthlessly questioned, and I do mean ruthlessly. That's not being funny. In the upper right-hand corner, you see received by coded teletype. Not only is this over a wire, much like if you go to the bank and you do a wire transfer, also known as TT, teletype. When you see that, that's what it means. There are abbreviations in here. One of them is BUDED. We would have pronounced that BUDED, but it's really a Bureau deadline, so now you know what that means. This is typed urgent to the Washington field office, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, talking about Shirley Temple by all her various names. Here's the reason. State Department has requested expedite investigation of Mrs. Black, who is being considered for presidential appointment, quote, position not stated. That's important. You'll need that, know that later. She is former child movie star Shirley Temple. Born this date, presently resides in Woodside, California. Since 3.5 years of age, been making motion pictures. See Who's Who for further background data. That's well said. No need to recap that. Now, a statement from the Bureau says to the agents, conduct no neighborhood investigations concerning Mrs. Black, unless some reason for doing so arises, at which time the Bureau approval should be secured. The Bureau did not want people snooping around Shirley's neighborhood to ask questions. They didn't want to let anyone know what they were doing around the neighborhood. That didn't stop them from going everywhere else, but this was a very private and secret event. This was totally classified, and it remains so. So, the Los Angeles determines the identities and present location of close relatives and are sent out leads by teletype. Notice this, each page is signed, sealed, and documented and put out there by a special agent in charge of this event. This reads like a dime store sordid romance novel. We're still going. Now, here's one of the many pages. I picked up on this one because if you look at line number 9-2077 with an asterisk, you will read non-derog, meaning non-derogatory. In other words, there's nothing derogatory about the appointee, Shirley Temple, but it is followed by the words victim in extortion case. So this is one of many. The FBI agents addressed to, at the top it says, to the chief clerk, where this was all logged and stored. Can you imagine somebody individually doing all of these researches by hand? Now, this document, this dossier on Shirley Temple Black is 211 pages of files. It was created in only 6 days. Can you imagine how many federal agents were on the case? This was huge, classified, quiet, and hidden. They were just determining if Shirley was qualified to be an appointee to a high government position. She was, in many cases, this was just getting started. Now, here's one of the ones I picked out to show you. We're talking here to Ned Hutchinson. He's an appointment secretary to California Governor Ronald Reagan. The FBI wrote this up, that he advised that appointee, that's Shirley, and husband, Charles Black, have been personal friends of his for several years and has visited their home on a few occasions. So they're visiting everybody. They're driving all over and knocking on doors. Hutchinson was a member of Governor Reagan's Businessmen's Task Force in 1967 with Charles Black. So he's well acquainted with Charles Black. And was closely associated with the appointee, Shirley, in her 1967 congressional campaign. Everybody knows she tried to run for Congress and it didn't succeed. He described appointee Shirley as a capable, conscientious, loyal citizen who would handle a high-level government position in a commendable fashion. So here's end page 1. Again, serialized, indexed, signed, redacted as to the agent's name, and put into the dossier. Very extensive legwork here. Well, you can't lead a public life without making enemies, huh? Maybe this is one of the reasons Shirley divorced Agar and reverted back to her name Temple. This is one of many things in here in references. Fellow business associates and acquaintances comment favorably and recommend appointee Shirley, except for Bill Asher, in caps. So Bill Asher's not real happy with Shirley. Let's find out why. Screen Gems Production, who was associated with the appointee Shirley in producing, quote, Shirley Temple Storybook Show. He feels that she is, quote, far right politically. Now I'm saying, you think? She's hanging around with presidents and vice presidents and governors. They're all Republicans. She is a little far right, huh? The appointee's ex-husband, now it gets interesting, John Agar. When they questioned Agar, and they did, he would hesitate to recommend Shirley, as she tended, they'll love this, as she tended to overreact if she did not get her way. Well, this is your typical child star. Everybody knows one, and probably threw a nice big hissy fit every time he wanted her to do something she didn't want to do. And so she was overreacting. But further it goes, a favorable credit record located concerning appointee Shirley's brothers and their wives. Credit record, however, concerning appointee's ex-husband reveals one repossession. An arrest record concerning appointee's ex-husband under a CII number here, an FBI number, and during an interview with Agar, Shirley's ex-husband. So this is a real detective hit story, huh? Moving on. Agar is certainly no angel. The FBI created a whole page on nothing but John Agar. What a sweetheart. Starting in February of 1950 through January of 1953, basically a year, John George Agar Jr. was arrested 6 times for drunk driving. Highway Patrol, Los Angeles Police Department a 3 times, and he was jailed at least once, maybe twice. So he spent 120 days apparently in jail and a lot of time on probation. Never did him any good apparently. So this is all compiled in the dossier, looking out to find out who was Shirley associated with. So Shirley had had enough of Agar. Here's the FBI's documentary on her divorce record. On August 13, 1969, you all know the files of the Superior Court in Los Angeles County were caused to be reviewed by SA, that's a special agent, and that's blanked redacted. These files disclosed under this docket number a complaint for divorce filed on October 13, 1949 by Shirley Temple Agar, the plaintiff, against John George Agar, defendant, charging extreme cruelty. The complaint indicated they were married September 19, 1945 in Los Angeles and separated October 12, 1949. One child born of this marriage, redacted, age redacted. Interlocutory judgment of divorce was granted December 5th, 1949, pretty much public knowledge, and a final judgment of divorce was granted December 7th, 1950. Here's the nice part. The plaintiff's maiden name was ordered restored to her. So now, Shirley Agar is now Shirley Temple. Now, even though she's a political novice, Shirley was biased, working with the presidents and that sort of thing. So here we're talking about Henry Jaffe and Asher again, and as the FBI interviews people, and they're talking to everyone. So he stated this series originated at the NBC studio. Henry Jaffe started the series, but it was later taken over by him. Asher, on the other hand, remember Asher wasn't happy with Shirley. He said Jaffe was mostly associated with the business interest rather than the creative end of the production. Sounds like he's trying to weasel away from the FBI's eye. Asher advised he had very limited social contact with the appointee, and he considered her to be, quote, the epitome of propriety. Okay, that's nice. But he also said in his opinion the appointee was extremely proper and very far right politically. He stated that because of these 2 traits, she tends to be set up to ridicule by the comedians of the era. Frankly, I'd never heard of that, but that was his comment. Asher, on the other hand, advised that the appointee is a loyal American citizen, and he never had any reason to question her character, associates, or reputation. But, there's the but, he would hesitate to recommend Shirley for a high-level government appointment unless he knew specifically what position she was under consideration for. Well, you remember I mentioned that the position was not stated? These were instructions from the Bureau to the FBI special agents that particular bit of information was not to be revealed. So here's the guy out in the field interviewing him, and he says, hey, so what's she being considered for? He says, either something like I don't know or I'm not allowed to say. And he says, then I wouldn't recommend her. What a sweetheart. Oh, here's a neat item. I found an article. It says that here's the day J. Edgar Hoover gave Shirley Temple a tear gas pin. When Temple was about 20 years old, Hoover decided to give her a gift that would protect her if necessary. On January 20th, 1949, he gifted her a fountain pen with a secret inside. It would emit tear gas if anyone decided to try and harm her again. A few years later, when Temple was dating Charles Alden Black, here's your romance novel, she asked Hoover to run a thorough background check on Charles Black. So she still got her connections. Drop a dime, make a phone call, call the head of the FBI, and you can find out anything you want on your new boyfriend. Apparently he came up clean because the two of them were wed on December 26, 1950. That was her second marriage. The two stayed together until 2005. So, nothing like having friends in high places, huh? Now, Governor Ronald Reagan also knew Shirley very well. Here's an article that the FBI put into the dossier. He said Governor Reagan advised he has known the appointee for at least 25 years professionally in moving pictures and officially since he became governor of the state of California. So Shirley always had a nice warm spot in Reagan's heart as well as Nixon. So she was in tight with all of them. Governor Reagan further advised, this is the name of the special agent that's been redacted, that he appointed Shirley Temple Black to the California Hospital Advisory Commission in Sacramento, California, in which position she did a wonderful job. Governor Reagan further advised that the above appointment was indicative of his trust and confidence in the appointee's ability. Governor Reagan feels that the appointee has unquestionable loyalty to the U.S. government and her morals are above reproach. He added that the appointee is a person of outstanding character and reputation and knows of nothing unfavorable concerning her. He also added that the appointee's associates are all persons of outstanding character and reputation. So Reagan's her best buddy, and no wonder she liked these presidents and vice presidents. So here's where your imagination has to take over a little bit. So think of the poor FBI agents. They go down to the Los Angeles Times library, and they are tasked, they've only got 6 days to do this, so there must have been 2 or 3 guys working on this. So they're in there learning the Dewey Decimal System and digging up articles on Shirley to compile this dirt list dossier. So each one of these is compiled in the 211-page document. You will now have a copy of, because I'm going to distribute one to everybody on the flash drive. These clippings sprinkle the text everywhere today to show her wide and varied career. Hey, I'm the recipient. The FBI did all the work for me. Here's some neat ones. I did not show many of them. There are so many it's hard to believe. And I found one in here that's neat. Shirley Temple heads the list at $5,000 a week, dated November 17, 1935, Exhibit H. Now this is Exhibit A through something like ZZZ, so there's plenty of sordid details here for your reading enjoyment. Now, here's one I picked out. Shirley dolls were not exempt from the limelight. So, on October 12, 1935, the dolls come to the limelight. The agent for the Temples is in a court action. He's trying to ensure he is the one representing the family and making the dolls and marketing them. Some of you might know that, but others might not, so I'm recapping it here. Now, Shirley's only 7 years old, and already the legal battles have started. Thanks to the tireless work of the FBI, we have a detailed record of Shirley from 1930 through 1969. This one's a little hard to read because the clipping was cut off a bit. But it says an application for nominal guardianship for Shirley Temple, child film star, was entered today in Queens Supreme Court by Sidney Rosenau. Rosenau's application explained as a preliminary step in enabling a suit against a company which is said to be manufacturing Shirley Temple dolls. I bet you all own some of these nice dolls. Assertedly, this was infringing on an exclusive contract between Shirley, her parents, and a Long Island doll manufacturer. So you might want to check who made your dolls and when, and if they were considered manufacturing those dolls, the value might go up if they were named in the lawsuit where the patents are being infringed upon. You might be sitting on a gold mine. Now, J. Edgar Hoover never lost his affection for Shirley, and he followed her career till the end of his storied reign at the FBI. They remained fast friends, and she had only to call. He would always answer. It says here, "Dear Shirley, I was pleased to learn that you have been awarded the Sarah Coventry Woman of the Year trophy for public service, and I want to extend my heartiest congratulations to you. This honor is indeed an expression of the respect and esteem you enjoy, and your friends in the FBI join me in wishing you continued success. J. Edgar Hoover." Marked personal, December 10th, 1969. Always her friend. Back to wind up the story here, here's the end of the Buick story. This car was purchased by Tom Barrett of the famous Barrett-Jackson Auction Company. Nobody knows when Tom purchased it, but he drove it around. He had a fun time driving it in his huge collection. Barrett was a car auctioneer, and he owned a lot of very important cars. So it was finally sold and re-entered the world on January 19th, 1984. But no one seems to know where it was for 40 years. However, later it turned up in Woodside, only a few miles from where Shirley and Charles were living. Shirley was reunited with her Buick, and she said, "Yes, that's my car. I spent many an hour riding in that car." So she has confirmed it. There's the end of the doubt on that. Here's the original auction notice. First time recorded that the Buick was sold, and it's back in the spotlight 40 odd years later after it left it. Now the Buick, shown in the lower right hand corner, is there. Above it is they really had some good cars. Here's Benito Mussolini's parade car. Down at the lower left, there's President Roosevelt's campaign car, and a 1927 Mercedes-Benz owned by Vanderbilt. So it's in good company. No one needs to explain the lollipop license plate. Now, it's not quite an L, it's a 1, but apparently somebody else got the L. So that's what it was on the car all that time. And it finally came around to this. Shirley rode around in a 1940 Buick. You've just seen all about that. And that may have caused her to start loving the 1940 era cars. So when her chance came, this is what she bought. This was Shirley's car. She bought a 1940 Ford Coupe bright red. Nobody seems to know where it went, though. So now you have seen the entire story, and this is the end of today's exhibit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this, and we're going to bring up the studio. And we're going to go over here, if I can find it, and we're going to start a chat. I'm going to bring up a chat window. I'm going to open this chat up for those of you at your home, not in here with us today, where you can type in questions and we can provide you with answers to those questions. If someone in the audience knows the answer and I don't, we'll get it for you. Thank you for participating today in Shirley by the Sea 2024.